starting to get a lot of questions about the U.S. national debt. Joe, what are you doing in your plan to account for a potential bubble, burst, catastrophe, whatever, associated with the national debt? As everyone knows, this week we reached another milestone, 35 trillion in debt. It's increased in the last 12 months, 2.4 trillion. So we're getting worse and accelerating. Is this sustainable? What if everything just blows up? One of the popular things to do is also look at your debt compared to gross domestic product, GDP, and we're at 122%. So 122% of our gross domestic product is the national debt, so total amount. So in 2020, it was worse. It was at 133, but COVID kind of knocked down the GDP, and that made this ratio spike up to 133. So it's an anomaly. Don't look at that. We're at highs. Okay, we're at highs. Just for reference, if you haven't done this, in the 1990s, it was roughly in the mid 60s. So let's say 1995, it was 65-ish. So we have gotten a lot worse in the last 25, 30 years, a lot worse. Now, in a normal household, this is a freaking disaster, okay? Eventually, somebody's going to stop loaning me money if I just keep borrowing every year. They're not going to let that happen. The banks won't let it happen. But what's confusing and difficult to get my head around, I'll be honest, is the U.S. generates its own currency. So it's not so clear cut. If they need money, you want $1 trillion, you just print $1 trillion. And what that means, that's not a printing press going off. It's a computer. And they just generate an asset and a liability. They generate $1 trillion worth of debt and $1 trillion worth of bonds. They just start selling. Okay, so the net of those is zero, but that's what they're doing. They're just generating money out of nothing. They need more money, they make more bonds. It does smell bad, and I'm concerned. It's kind of like the early 2000s. Most of you that listen to this channel are around my age. You know that you could get 105% loan against your house, 105%. So you close on your house and they give you money, 5% of the value, and you didn't even have to have a job. And this was going on. It was freaking crazy. Houses were appreciating in value, so people were buying houses without a job, getting this 105%, holding it for a year, paying interest only, and then selling it and making, $20,000. And it was just a game that was going on. There's also people associated with the national debt that believe that, hey, if we're borrowing money as a country from ourselves, we're borrowing money, creating money, and only paying 3% loan on that, and the economy grows at 4, 5%, that's actually a good thing. So if you go on YouTube, there'll be people that say the national debt is a good thing. It's a good thing. The country's growing. Up until a point, I think that can be true. When you're at 122%, I think that argument goes away. I think that was a great argument maybe at 50% of GDP, but I struggle with that now. The problem is inflation. So when you introduce these new dollars, it makes the old dollars less valuable, okay? So it devalues current dollars. And this, I think, this is what everybody talks about, is the way the U.S. government gets out of this issue is they don't pay off the debt. They service the debt, pay the minimum, but they devalue it. So $1 trillion today has a 10 years from now, that $1 trillion will feel like maybe 750 billion. Okay, too big of numbers to get my mind around it, but it's devalued in the future because it's eroded by inflation. And I think that's the game. Example this, you got a $150,000 house that you bought in the year 2000, and it's worth $450,000 today in 2024. So you bought it for 150, it's worth 450 today. It makes that $100,000 mortgage you got on your house look pretty insignificant compared to the 450,000. Okay, so that hopefully that makes sense, that you can understand that inflation eats away and makes tomorrow's dollars less valuable, or today's dollars. Sorry, today's dollars are less valuable in the future. Now, as you can tell from this intro, I'm an engineer. Macroeconomics is not my thing, but there's some things I do know for sure, and I think you can agree with these. Number one, the national debt is not the same as me managing my household. It's not the same. It's a little more complex than that. Number two, maybe this is a little bit of hope in here, that there's smart people trying to manage this. Smart people. I don't think those folks are in Congress. I think those people are behind the scenes, like in the Fed. Maybe a Treasury Secretary. I think those are very smart people, much smarter than me on pulling the levers. Number three, Congress is not the answer. They keep kicking the problem down the road. They're interested in being elected. There's a lot of money in being an elected official. They kick the can down the road for the next regime to have to deal with. Number four, it just doesn't feel right to me. Just like I said, in the 2000s, around the mortgage crisis, and even the dot-com earlier in the, around 2000, 2001, that dot-com, if you had dot-com behind your business, even if you didn't have any revenue and no profit, you were a good company. And those things just didn't feel right. And I put this debt in the same category. One of these days, we're going to look back on the debt crisis and say, we should have seen this coming. So I think I do. I know this can't last, but the problem is, can't last. Is that 1 year? Is that 20 years? Is that 50 years? And that's where nobody agrees. When's this bubble going to burst? You can't keep spending by $2.5 trillion over your income every year. Just can't do it. So what am I doing? This all lead up to what am I doing? As the Stoics say, what can I control? What can I control? And so I got 6 things here. Looking at my list. Number one, don't panic. I don't believe there's an earth-shattering event, cataclysmic event that is imminent. I don't believe that. It's not going to happen tomorrow, I believe. A buddy of mine, he was looking at all the tea leaves and all his indicators, and he pulled out of the stock market a couple years ago, thinking this is it. Well, he's missed out on an enormous amount of growth because he did that. Don't panic. Number two, second thing I'm doing, I have a buffer against a 10-year downturn. I use buckets, my bucket 1 and 2, which are not in stocks. They're in things like bonds, treasury bills, money market funds, high yield savings accounts. I should be able to handle a 10-year downturn. Now, when I retired, I only had 6, but because the stock market kept growing and growing and growing and growing, I expanded that to 10. Quite frankly, because I could. Also, it's a buffer against this problem that I see with the national debt, and that's probably my main one, the national debt. So I got this buffer. Number 3, own assets, a home, investments, rental property. Some say gold and silver, but as you know, that's not me. I don't invest in things I don't know. Gold and silver I'm talking about. I know business, and I know at business you got great, smart people trying to innovate, trying to create. They're trying to grow, and I like that. I like betting on people versus buying a block of metal and hoping, that is a stabilizing asset for me. I just don't do that. You can argue that in the comments. I've heard pros and cons, but I just don't do it. The people that get massacred by the inflation, the big concern I see with the debt, are those living paycheck to paycheck, because things just get more expensive, more expensive. They don't have their assets growing. I, you know, anyway, I'll jump on the number 4. I was trying to think of something else to say there. But owning assets, I think, is important in investments. And I'm currently 80% of my investable assets is actually in a stock fund. Number 4, limit low returning cash. And what I mean by that is, try to get, 5% now is not too hard to get on your cash, on your non-stock money, whether it's money market fund, T-bills, CDs, high yield savings account. Should be able to get pushing 5% right now, which is a little bit better than inflation in some areas. But it's a nice offset. A buddy of mine calls inflation termites. So you can't just put $100 in a sock. When you come back a year later, there's only going to be $92 in that sock. It's been eaten by termites and gone. So I do not go crazy with this. Some people just have, all kinds of different things they're invested in, trying to chase 0.01% return. I don't. Most of mine, honestly, is now in a money market fund. But T-bills are interesting. So really focus on what you're doing with your cash and get a decent return out of that, so the termites don't get all of it. Number 5, the 5th thing I'm doing is paying taxes now. Know your freaking taxes. This year and every year until you're 90. Know what they are every year. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to file my taxes this year and see what I have to pay. Or I don't pay any taxes this year because I'm retired and I'm just living off some assets. That's not good. That's not managing your taxes. You got to have vision going out 20, 30, 40 years, especially when RMDs hit. What tax bracket does that throw you in? That's a massive miss on 50% of the DIY plans out there that I've seen is taxes. They just kind of go, yeah, next topic. It's huge. Taxes. Know your taxes. Number 2, this is all under taxes. Second thing under taxes, expect your tax brackets and the to change, and also the percentage you pay in those brackets to change. So they got to raise more money. It's not going to change for the better. They're not going to lower taxes. We are at historic lows. I can't remember the year, but the highest tax bracket used to be 90%. Now I think it's 37%. Next bullet under taxes is, what I'm doing is I'm filling up the 24% tax bracket right now. I'm just converting that out of my IRA into a Roth, filling up the 24%. I'm actively doing that. The 5th thing under taxes, if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, TCJA, expires in 2026, that 24% tax bracket jumps up to 28. I'll have to re-examine what I'm doing. So that could expire in 2026. Trump took a lot of credit for that. I think he wants to extend it. I don't know what's going to happen. The Democrat side of the aisle says, hey, nobody's below $400,000 is going to see any tax increase. I got some comments about that in a second. So it's next. If your income is low, say you're making the average, and say you're making as a family $80,000 a year, and you're promised no tax increases will apply to you. Get ready. If you increase corporate taxes, you increase taxes paid by business owners like your plumber, your HVAC person, your butcher, your corner grocer, your gas station, wherever you buy anything, you increase their taxes. Guess what? That's going to get passed on to you, and is not going to look like a tax. It's going to look like inflation. Okay, so everybody gets massacred by this, especially the lower income people get massacred by inflation. So taxes is the fifth thing I'm doing. Get really aggressive on managing your taxes. Don't just pay whatever it is. Okay, you can control a lot, especially in retirement. You can, when you're a W-2 employee and you're just getting a paycheck from your business, you don't have a lot of leverage there. A couple little things, but when you're retired, huge things. You know, you can have an HSA. You can, do Roth conversions. You can decide where you're pulling money out of, which assets, and make sure you got that 30-year, 40-year look. RMDs is huge. Sixth thing I'm doing is I know where my money's spent. Okay, so being retired, you got a little more time on your hands. I got time to digging into my subscriptions, my insurance premiums. I can shop around for things a little bit more, look for sales. I just bought ribeye steaks. I bought 30 ribeye steaks, $7 a pound. Normal at my grocery here in little old Indiana, where the cows are right next door, it's normal price is closer to $15, sometimes $18 a pound. So I got 7. So you get a chance to shop around. I go to the grocery store. I went this morning at like 8:30 in the morning. There were 2 people in the store. That's one of the great things about retirement. Nobody's in these stores. It's just great shopping. And I hit the button for the butcher to help me. They sliced them, the ribeyes, whatever I wanted. I hit the button for the butcher. 3 butchers came out of the back to help me out. That's the kind of service you get when you're retired and you go at 8:30 in the morning. So I know where your money is spent. If you listen to my channel at all, you know I have a quarterly review process. I go into my expenses, I update my spreadsheets, I update new retirement, I look at my taxes every 90 days. I don't do it any more often than that. Okay, now inside that 90 days, I may look at an insurance bill that came in and say, I'm gonna go look at I'm gonna requote auto insurance or something like that. Or I may look at a subscription to Hulu or something like that on the television. It's like, God, we don't watch this Hulu. What is that? That's $9.99 a month. We don't get that. And one of the cool things about subscriptions now on television is they don't lock you into long-term ones, long-term contracts. So you may be able to, during football season, open one up, have it for 6 months, then shut it down during the summer. During the wintertime, you may, crank up the subscription to the Hallmark channel because you love those movies. So pay attention to where your money's going. You have a little more time in retirement. I'm doing that. But honestly, I don't buy a whole lot of stuff, but it's something I do know where every dollar is going, but I don't get eaten up by that. So those are the 6 things I'm doing about the national debt, really targeting inflation and targeting a burst of a bubble that is going to happen sometime. I've got my bucket 1 and 2 protecting me against that. So those are the 6 things. What are you doing about the national debt? What advice do you have for me about the national debt? Put it in the comments. Everybody read the comments. There's going to be gold in there. I promise you somebody's going to have me doing an additional action because of a brilliant comment. I'm expecting it from you. It's Joe out.